Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. I'm going to turn this music down a bit. I wanted to have in the background. Re-downloaded my royalty-free music, which should not be copyright flagged by any party, or I will challenge it. And if I ever have the funds, I will do it legally and take you to task for interfering with my channel, you, shall I say, effing assholes. Okay, this is a new segment, the Ominous Hour. You can see a kind of saltier, spicier Rob than you've been seeing for a while, and thus some of the new channel artwork, which is a bit more in your face and less friendly than it used to be. Because when this channel started, I am now realizing I was heavily under the influence of some pretty negative forces that were trying to drag my message in a direction that suited their purpose. And I think you've noticed, if you've been watching this channel since I started, the definition of what is an omnist is coming to be more refined as the difference between truth and nice-sounding lies is becoming more apparent. And there are evil beliefs. There are dark forces. And that's what this particular presentation is going to be about. Let me turn that music down just a tad more, because it might be, I know some of my listeners find it annoying. The topic today, I think I will entitle demonic possession, mental illness, and how the modern world defines these things, perhaps quite incorrectly. Okay, let's launch into it. As we talked about on the last session, this is going to be building on some of the stuff I was talking about that I didn't really get to when we were talking about how this Ramadan season that started with the prayer had some pretty dark times for me, some pretty big challenges, which, who knows, maybe you're still underway. So we'll see how this goes. I'm going to actually use a separate thing for my whiteboard and an app now, so you won't be so frustrated with it, and you'll get to see more of what I'm drawing and less of me. So bear with me. So as we left it last time, we were talking about a different vision of what was going on Earth, where a God, a senior level soul, who I will tell you is the real God, is locked in a struggle against the dark God, which I prefer to think of as BORG rather than Satan, because I think that Star Trek term conveys his nature much more, shall we say, modernly than the old concept of Satan, although the thing is still the same. Although this BORG does not really make legal contracts, as you would think. Not always, yes, there is some sense of that, but actually, if you're getting a contract to sell your soul, you are working with somebody that's actually more obedient to God's laws than this dark God and his followers, BORG. At any rate, within this this battle between these spiritual entities, they decided at a point to conduct. Why are we getting the wedding? That's well, maybe it is appropriate for this discussion. This might be a kind of a strange thing, as I think my playlist is actually going through cycling rather than staying on the same one. Let me go back and loop. I can't stand listening to this while we're talking about something holy and talking about some very evil things. So I'm gonna put that on loop. I forgot to put it on loop. Okay, so in the beginning, God and this spiritual enemy of God, a lesser God, lowercase G-O-D, developed the power to challenge God by basically stealing other souls and making them part of him instead of, basically taking their freedom and free will and making them totally subservient to him. Now, the servants of the real God were independent souls, maybe with not as much consciousness, not as much power, but who basically played around God and tried to come up with their own good ideas and tried to learn from God as best they could. Now, this BORG creature maybe started out as one of these, but eventually developed into this and tried to overtake God in spiritual power and thus win the war in heaven. Now, as I told you, it ended up in a stalemate, and that's why we had physical universes created. And the creation of physical universes was actually a co-project of these two. God, as a spiritual creator and a very convincing parent, talked this BORG cat into, you know what, we both have some good ideas, and you certainly need some organization in heaven and a top leader, and you've made a good case that you might be a better leader than I, because you have many more souls allied with you, granted that they are rather low-level souls, because it seems, well, he didn't say this, but actually what was happening here is as soon as these souls got pulled into his influence from God's independent part of the universe, the spiritual universe, they started becoming less creative because their thoughts and their missions were all directed not by their own desires, but by the desires of BORG or some higher level servant of BORG. So this is how authoritarian regimes work, right? At any rate, what God talked BORG into was creating the first physical universes. Now, one of these universes was captained by a volunteer from the God side, the male demiurge, we kind of think of this cat, and one was captained by a chosen favorite of BORG, which we think of as the female demiurge, those of us who are aware of there being two demiurges. Now, before you call me sexist, I'm going to tell you that this BORG demiurge was not female at all. Just represented initially the authoritarian mind of BORG. The ideas of the BORG side that said absolute power and absolute control over the people under you was a better way to organize. And it had to be coming from all the way from the top to be effective. And if you know anything about how a communist country is organized, this is how they think. Xi Jinping is Lord and Master of China, and anything he says, no matter how stupid it is carried out through the organization below him willy-nilly. Okay, so these two physical universes were the first incarnations of spiritual entities into a physical form. And from the very beginning, there was an agreement that this incarnation should take them back to a forgetfulness. This is what we call reincarnation amnesia. So these two started out at a very low level of consciousness, even though they were the overlords of a whole universe, the oversouls or overlords. Well, we're still not getting. We're going to be talking. We're going to be talking about this. I guess we're going to get into marriage at some point. Okay, so this is some background of what we're going to talk about. Now, the Catholic Church will tell you that demons are servants of Satan who can worm their way into human bodies and take over control of you. And this is certainly a partial truth, but not all the truth. Because as I've told you, your body is made up of a lot of souls of different levels, and you are the oversoul of the whole body. This is, I'm sorry, I've got to really get this working now. Maybe I've got to stop it and start this one I like better, because it's better background for talking about demons and stuff. Okay. So, the truth is that the Catholics don't understand is that this BORG cat works both ways. They work as an evil entity, but they also work as an entity pretending to be good but doing evil. And in fact, much of the clergy of the Catholic Church, not all of it by any means, but much of the clergy and many of the, quote, great theologians that have added to the doctrine or translated the Bible or decided what books of the Bible stayed in or stayed out, were not servants of God, but servants of the antigod, BORG. Real servants of God are humble enough and have enough understanding of logic to know that God could not possibly be almighty, all-knowing, all-powerful, because then nobody would have any free will, right? And everybody knows that any God worth worshiping would leave you your free will to make your own choices. You don't want to be a zombie controlled by, like a puppet by God, right? Well, maybe some people do. Some people say, Jesus, lead me. Tell me everything I need to do. Well, that's a person that wants to be controlled by something like BORG and not under the leadership of a God who likes to have children that think for themselves, that make their own mistakes to learn, that don't look to God to tell them everything to do every second of the day because they're so unsure of their own abilities. That is an enabling, domineering nanny God. And that's why, the BORG so often manifests in female characteristics. This is the dark side of women in their parenting role or in their relationship roles or in any other roles, or feminine manifesting males. Okay, the dark side of femininity is one of trying to control and protect and coddle and enable. This is what universal love is stupidly about. Universal love makes no rational sense. If you think about it, if you love everything the same no matter what, you are enabling obvious evil. And even little evils, if they are not pointed out and at least spanked as punishment, are going to grow into bigger evils. And this is how BORG works on people. People who enable others, who coddle others, these passive narcissists who get, masochistic pleasure out of being hurt by others so they can pretend they're all holy and unconditional loving until they choose to lash out by divorcing or whatever their, quote, narcissistic partner. This is their evil that they do, not even recognizing, thinking they're the noble ones that gave up everything and just got stepped all over in their rationalizing view of, the events of the relationship. And I think you've known many people like that. Okay, so the Catholic view of demons is as only evil entities, that everybody has demons. Everybody has dark thoughts. And those thoughts, if acted on, give you an attraction to entities in the BORG universe. And they will start attaching themselves to you and worming their way. It's supposed to be looping here. Why not looping? I'm going to go back and we're going to be playing tag between the marriage march and this more appropriate music, I guess. So maybe I reboot, maybe then loop will work. Okay, so what I'm telling you is demonic possession is something we are all subject to, no matter how good we think we are, no matter how much we're following what our guru or preacher or holy book tells us is the right way to behave so you can be pure and holy and loved by God. And because God is not who he pretends to be. When you have overt, manipulative contacts with spiritual entities, which is what a lot of these people who say, oh, my spiritual guides are telling me this. Oh, I'm channeling the angel Metatron, or Archangel Michael, or the Pleiadians. They have no idea that they're dealing with who they think they are. And in many cases, they are being demonically manipulated by servants of this BORG. And this is the truth of demonic possession. This is actually closer to the Muslim view of God having his people challenged by the jinn. These powerful spiritual entities that might be either good or evil, and you really don't know, because they're so much more spiritually adept than the average human that they can play tricks on you. They can say, oh, I'll give you 3 wishes if you do this. Now that sounds like a dangerous thing, but sometimes it ends up well, and sometimes it gets you possessed by an evil jinn who imprisons you in their prison and goes and takes your place, taking on your shape and everything to enjoy some time in the world. Look at the stories from the 1001 Nights of Scheherazade, whoever the real woman who was behind that series of stories, the Islamic world would not have attributed them to a woman unless there probably really was some concubine of some sultan who came pretty close to that story. Maybe not 1001 nights, and maybe they were not going to be killed. Maybe they were going to be, sent to the lower harem, so a new girl could be brought up from the provinces. I don't know. But the Scheherazade stories are another very spiritual book, full of a lot of truth that is why they are still read to children and still translated by people like Richard Burton, not the actor, but the British translator and author who gave us our wonderful English language version, which is now in the public domain. Anybody can go and read it. I think I'm going to go back to my other background so you can see a bigger version of me, because I'm not going to be drawing so much now. Okay, and I think you see why I'm using this background. I'm finding new art of William Blake and other prophets ahead of their time created in trying to convey their ideas of a Christianity that they saw as having bifurcated into basically 2 Christianities, one which was distinctly evil and one which still retains some good. And this is what I'm telling you about all religions, all dogmas, all of the old religions, all of the new religions have their elements of godliness to the extent that their agents, spiritual or physical, do things in a godly way, in respect and honor of karma and the sovereignty of individual souls. If you are under the influence of a guru that is trying to tell you what to do, when to do, what to think, and mentally making you feel subject to their authority, this is an evil guru. This is how cults start. And I think any of you who are honest will know that there are cult leaders in all religions, in all spiritual tribes, who, if enabled by their followers, will become more and more authoritarian. And this is something I talked about in my first book. The later chapters, I added a chapter based upon an idea I had for a healthy spiritual community. Because I had friends that were, I've got to get out of this. I'm going to go find some friends and establish some, remote where we all work and raise food and get back to nature and stuff like that. And I was starting to hear horror stories of how these communities started out very spiritual and very good examples of how a community, how a commune might work, and how communism might be done right, and mostly become dominated by some increasingly authoritarian, pushy leaders that wanted to dictate to the group because they thought they knew more than everybody else. Maybe they were the founder, or one of the ones who did the most work or added the most value, and or there were multiple people that competed for it, and the community would split apart and splinter, which is not healthy either. And I tried to describe in my book and in that vision what a healthy spiritual community might be based upon omnist principles. And I'm not going to go into that now, but that is something that I hope somebody will look at and consider doing a test run of somewhere in the world. And if I'm able and free to do it, I would be glad to be a consultant for that activity and guide them to an omnist spiritual community. Not of one religion, but of people of many religions and backgrounds that share the common omnist thought that we need to be respectful of others' opinions and positions as long as they don't start interfering with ours. So the core of omnism is really anti-authoritarianism, anti-mind control, anti-BORG. And that's why, I've kind of got to the point where the gloves are off, and I know where I stand in the battle on earth and the battle in heaven, which are one. It's a battle of free will souls, including God, including a lot of other senior creators, and a lot of lesser souls, newer souls on their way to learn who they are, and this bunch of evil souls that all have been assimilated to bow and grovel to this almighty antigod who wants to be the God, to replace the God. And this is the truth that the Bible doesn't quite get it, Gnosticism doesn't quite get it, Islam doesn't quite get it, Buddhism doesn't get it. No religion gets it because they're all being infiltrated by this authoritarian presence, which is, absolutely manifested in the atheist god of communism. Well, there we go with marriage again. Okay, that's funny. At any rate, so the truth of demonic possession is that we are all subject to it, and it does not always manifest as, this stuff that goes on in The Exorcist. But the thing about the movie The Exorcist that is very true, and Catholic exorcists, the good ones, the real ones, know, is that it can very easily be transferred onto the exorcist, especially if they get a sense of, oh, I'm so powerful because I can exorcise these demons. You see where this is going? And this is why The Exorcist is a very good movie to watch. Even though it's an old one, it does actually do a pretty good job of showing the reality of exorcism. It does it in sort of an anti-religious way, making it seem like, well, okay, so I guess, you know, Catholic exorcism may work, but it can be just as bad or worse than not doing anything, and maybe we should use drugs and psychiatry and psychology to solve the problem. Okay, so, you know, there is a bit of cultural Marxism in that movie that was, if you've been watching American film from the last 100 years, that, as I have, you'll see that there's been a definite progression from one set of values to another, but both sets of values are influenced by different conceptions of this almighty, all-powerful God that people think is the God of the Bible. Is actually written in the Bible, which I'm going to have another session, probably the next one, talking about the truth about the Bible codes, which you may have heard about if you follow Greg Braden and some of the other people that are talking about what's in the Bible codes. I'm going to tell you why they were added and why they aren't all what you think. Also, why the Bible isn't all what you think. Anyway, I'm not going to steal my fire from the next presentation about that just yet. What else should I hit on here? Well, we're going to talk about mental issues. A lot of the people that are treated for mental issues these days are being done so because they are getting inspirations, visions from God, or being tortured by attempts at taking over their sovereignty by this antigod BORG. And I will tell you that I now understand that's why I've had my dark nights of the soul and I've spent time in mental hospitals, because there's a pattern to it. I will begin getting these new strong visions of more information coming about the truth of God, the truth of humanity's history, the truth of the Gaia experiment, the truth of how the Big Bang happened and how it led to this planet where we're arguing over whether God exists or not to this day. And yet all areas of science are pointing towards there being a creative organizing force which operates like a scientist. It's intelligent design. Not the God of the Bible. There is much reality captured in the Bible, but it is couched in a language of obfuscation and infiltration by the agents of BORG, who have been active since before we had human languages, human speech. You know what? I may just get into that other topic that I was going to say for another, because I'm really getting there, and I've just got to go there. So, what is the Bible really, and why does it have biblical quotes? At some point, all of the world's great books of spirituality were remembrances finally written down of stuff that was passed through telepathy when people were more like the gods that created, had more powers. And if you follow the work of people that are studying the old megalithic structures and stuff like that, you will find there's this common thread of, geez, these things must have been constructed by people who had incredibly advanced technologies that we don't even know about, like who could slice rock into exact shapes, geometric shapes, in such a way that walls could be built with this strange blocks of weird outline that fit together in such a way you couldn't even fit a sheet of paper between them. And which, you know, structural engineers who look at them say, wow, if I was going to design something that would withstand almost any earthquake, almost any cataclysm that the earth could undertake and not take a licking and keep on ticking. The pyramids, the stone structures, the Sacsayhuaman, they're being found all over the earth, even hundreds of feet, meters under the water. Dwarka, off the coast of India, the Bermuda Road. They're still arguing that they're natural structures, and this argument is getting more flimsy and flimsy day by day. Nature doesn't produce structures designed as stairs, structures designed as towers, structures designed as monuments. Nature has its own monuments, but they don't look like that. At any rate, what happened in all these cultures is, as they realized that they could no longer transmit this information telepathically, because fewer and fewer people were able to do that, they began creating languages. And this is the truth behind the whole Tower of Babel stuff. They started creating their own languages, and eventually there were so many different languages and nobody understood each other, and that was considered kind of a disaster. And why did we do this? Why won't the gods come back and give us their powers of communication without language? Do they hate us, etc., etc.? And this is one of the stages of the war, as it's been, the war in heaven, and as it's been extended on earth. And this is what's behind a lot of people believing, well, gee, all we need to do is go recover all those powers that were taken away from us or hidden from us, and suddenly we'll have another golden age. Well, these powers were taken away for a reason, because they were giving too much power to souls that weren't really advanced enough in consciousness to resist BORG and to resist coming under the mind control of a more powerful entity and getting their spiritual powers abused by somebody who had been mentally convinced that they were doing good when they were doing evil. And if you don't see that happening among the elites of every country, of every global megacorporation or corporate cartel right now, you are blind. And you are probably well on your way to becoming a BORG servant. No more marriage music. Okay, and that's why this is such an important message and why I am risking cancellation to tell you. And this is why I have been under attack by BORG. Every time I get to revealing something like this, important, I'll start understanding it, I'll start writing it down and sharing it, and I will have something happen that drives me into this weird mental state where I am convinced I'm in another reality, another world. In one of the episodes, I became convinced that folks knew what I was preaching, and it had come to the attention of Donald Trump. And he was flying to Denver, Colorado to meet with me. My vision was at that time, I didn't think that much of Trump. I didn't think much of the Democrats, the establishment Democrats either. So I actually voted for Jill Stein in 2016 after Bernie was shafted. And then became assimilated, I guess you would say, wouldn't you? If you know anything about the new Bernie Sanders versus the guy that was passionately gaining followers in the 2016 primaries. At any rate, I had this idea that Donald Trump had started feeling the spiritual effects of his body telling him he was doing evil, was causing much antagonism amongst his people and leading them towards a civil war, as many of the left still thinks, and is partially right. I don't think Donald Trump is the Messiah or the anti-Messiah. And I'm not sure if he is serving God or serving BORG, or maybe confused and in between, like most of us actually are. You know, he's done some good things, and he's done some things that caused, you know, some of his dumb comments were exactly what the left wanted to hear, to throw darts at his supporters and characterize all folks that were anti-establishment as far-right extremists, which they're trying to do now. At any rate, this is an example, and that landed me in a mental hospital in Colorado for a couple of weeks and caused me to lose custody, lose the primary caretaking of my youngest daughter, which was incredibly painful to me and continues to be to this day. I'm not going to tell you what happened in all of them. Maybe the most recent one I'll mention, because I think you can relate to it. I was in the mental hospital the most recently because my alternate reality fantasy that came over me was that there was there was a world where this crazy hidden trial was going on, almost like you would think of as the trial in heaven of all the conspirators of humanity's crimes. And it was this weird affair where the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, the defender were all changing. And one minute, you know, would be on the stand, and the next minute she'd be the defendant, and the next minute she might be the prosecutor. The same with, you know, Biden, Trump, all the big figures, and, you know, Hollywood celebrities, and it was really weird. It was incredibly interesting because it was so realistic. And I started telling my wife about it, and she thought I was actually absolutely flipped out, and took me to the mental hospital in Jakarta again for another 2-week stay. And I really didn't need to be there. I wasn't going to do anything really crazy. I was just sharing this really weird information I was receiving. And I think there's a lot of people that end up in a mental hospital that are like that. They are just getting some weird premonition of some alternate reality that is so real they got to tell somebody about it, and it sounds so crazy and abnormal that their friends and family think, hey, you better go to the loony bin and get some drugs. And a lot of people are so scared by that experience that they, wow, I'm never going to do that again. If I ever start feeling that again, I'm gonna go get drugged up. And you have, you know, half the country on psychotic drugs, or, you know, dampening drugs like, you know, I don't, you know, what is it? Like, I don't take many drugs, so I don't know the names of them. But, you know, there are a lot of people on drugs that basically have developed a habit and take them on a continuous basis to make sense of a world that really doesn't make sense. And that's, I mean, anybody that knows what getting sucked into that legal drug culture is like, it's as bad or worse than getting sucked into the so-called illegal drug culture. And, even among spiritual people, there are folks that, have absolute faith in things like ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, LSD, straight DMT. There are many spiritual substances that can, from plant bases. I'll talk about the plants probably in more detail some other time. But the reason they can do this is that they have had their own God-level members of their tribe of DNA-related things that have the ability for spiritual activity, spiritual communication. Plants have souls, and some of them have souls that can communicate with humanity. And some of them do that in a way that support God, and some of them do that in a way that support BORG. They are not all good. They are not all evil. They are nuanced, just like humanity. And that's why some people may use marijuana, may use alcohol, and it's a very healthy therapeutic experience for them. That's why they call alcohol spirits, because when it came into use in the human history, which is through the exigency of the god Pan, also known as Bacchus. I'll tell you more about this god because you really need to know about this one. It's not who you've seen, who you think it is. This was like the main substance, one of the main substances used to help bring people into a state of openness to the divine, which they weren't really aware was both a possibility to get in touch with God and his allies, not his empire. And the evil one and his empire of zombie stooges, mind-controlled entities of all levels, who, if they stepped one way or the other from the mission they were given by BORG, would be severely punished, and maybe even have their mind completely zapped into blubbering idiocy. This is what can happen to people if they start opposing the evil one. And if you've ever seen somebody who has dealt with severe mental issues, you know that that's kind of where they get when they get to the point where they can't live in normal society anymore, and you face the challenge of having to commit them permanently. And it's really sad, because I can tell you that in these institutions of mental health, they do not treat people. They treat conditions. If you look at the book of mental issues, it has grown from, a one page to like this huge tome where they've got, this condition, look. Tell you, if somebody's behaving like this, give them these drugs. And you've got a myriad of psychiatrists handing out drugs for conditions and almost no market for therapists, psychologists. And of the psychologists that are out there, they treat people like they are all abnormal, not individuals with different problems, different realities, different challenges with reality, which is the truth of mental health issues. And they are all spiritual. They are all people dealing with the fact that the realities that they are given by other people may not be the realities they see with their own eyes and they experience with their own lives, or fit with the experiences that they kind of instinctively have left from their past lives. And this is why It is absolutely not true that we are all equal. This is a lie. And you can look around you at the people around you and you can say, yeah, it's obvious a lie. There are people who grow up from the worst parents, the worst environment, the fewest chances, who somehow end up being our most respected scholars, our most valued intellectuals. A good example is Thomas Sowell, who is the most respected black man in the intellectual community, at least the ones that are honest and not just saying, well, anybody who talks intelligent that's black must be better than anybody who's intelligent and is white, because that is the new normal. That is the new doublespeak. That is the new true lie. We are living in a reality of true lies. And we have been for time. The teachings of the Catholic Church include a lot of true lies, a lot of big whoppers. And that's why there was a Reformation, because people found so much evil in the Catholic Church that they decided, well, this can't be possibly what God is about, and I'm going to go back to the Bible and look for my truth. Now, those people didn't do any better because there were already untruths in the Bible. And this is what I have to get back to my story about history. So when people created languages, they at first did not have any written language because they still had really good memories. That was another facet of being godlike. Your memory was much better and could hold a lot more. As we know, because we know that given all of the circuits we have in our brains, we could be able to process 90% more information if we just had a way to organize it. And that organization we don't have because our souls have a dampened interface with our physical body, or vice versa. I think it is, the souls have their capability, but our incarnation vehicle, the human species, has a lot of its spiritual interfaces removed, except for the occasional person who seems to have this renewed contact with it. The people that can manifest things, the people that have some telepathic ability, some clairvoyant ability, some latent spiritual ability that, if they hone it and learn to use it, can be quite powerful. This is something that does happen, and many of these people use those abilities to control and manipulate others. They create mythologies that, anybody can do this if you just follow my program and pay me $500 or whatever, or attend my seminars. And these are people that are abusing their power, and by doing so, they are beginning to serve BORG. And this is really a warning to you that no matter what religion you have, no matter what your spiritual beliefs, no matter who you're following or what you think is the truth, I'm telling you, you are at risk of, after this event is over, which I'm telling you is coming soon. You may not have another incarnation in a human form before you find that heaven is a very different experience than you expected it to be, whatever your beliefs are. Because after this event is over, your soul will either be learning its lessons in the BORG universe, or in one of God's universe, or one of the other independent gods, which senior creators are the ones that have full knowledge of their own universe. Once you get to the God level of consciousness, you begin to have consciousness of being a independent creator, but you aren't really aware that you've actually already got your own universe. You don't know when you're making the transition between incarnation in another God's universe and in your own. This is true of all souls. This is how virtual souls work. When you move to another universe, it's like hopping on one train and getting to another, and it's so perfected by this point that almost nobody notices anything like the Mandela effect. Whoa, something weird shifted. Whoa, I just looked across the street and there used to be this car there, and now it just suddenly disappeared. What just happened? And those of you who have had those experiences, that's what you've experienced. You've experienced a break, shifting from one universe to another. And why that happens is because if you are involved in this new law of karma, which has not affected every soul yet, it's being tested and refined at a finer and finer detail till the final test is going on this planet Earth. That's why Earth has been isolated from all the other species in the galaxy. And in the spiritual world, isolated from most spiritual entities, except some that have been granted access through the efforts of their leaders, God or BORG. And as this event has entered its final stage of God incarnating personally to see how things are going and say, nah, you're not quite ready yet, or not even waking up enough to see what's going on, till BORG says, you got destroyed again. BORG is the one that does apocalypses. God is the one that's trying to do the ascension, trying to bring you to the next level as a species, to become a God species, not a test species. As a test species, humanity is attracting souls of every level and every persuasion. And that's why there are so many evil souls on this planet. How would God allow that? He had to, because you're doing a test. If you're testing something new and you don't want problems to show up later that you can't fix, you've got to test all the corner cases. And so there are souls of every shape and description, and even now souls coming into the species that are coming from, like a totally different God-level species, like the Pleiadians or the Arcturans, or all of these celestial folks that, whoa, what am I doing in this weird human body? I'm used to having a totally different culture, and you've got what they call these indigo children, who are totally at a loss of, how did I get into this? They're coming from species that never had sex, that self-pollinated, if you will, like some trees do. And they're like, how do I deal with this weird body and this process that tells me I've got to go have sex with somebody else and find attraction for somebody else that looks weird to me, different than me? This is why we have sexual dysmorphia. And this is being used by the evil one to create discord and hate, where it should just be, God's way is live and let live. But don't force this thing on everybody else, because that is bad karma. If you're going to force your trans kid into girls' restrooms, where girls feel uncomfortable having somebody that looks like a boy, especially if they're looking at them when they're naked and saying, how can I look more like her? Where they think, what a creep. I mean, God, think of what these poor girls are going through. I need to have some water, but I don't want to stop yet. I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon, but I want you to think about that, how inconsiderate, how selfish it is to force your differentness on others who don't have that differentness. They have no obligation to accept you into their traditional practices. If you want to have trans teams, make your own teams and compete against boys and girls. I don't care. Maybe we should only have sports that have teams of, whatever species you want. You can have dogs on your team. You can have aliens on your team when you are aware of them and if they want to come play with you. That's how it's going to be in God's universe after the event. In BORG's universe, you're still going to be fighting with everybody else for getting higher up on the rung towards being appreciated by God, which is never who you think it is. It's always at the top, this BORG authoritarian who claims to be God, but is Satan. And yes, Christians are worshiping Satan, thinking they're worshiping Jesus. Muslims are worshiping Satan, thinking they're worshiping Allah. Allah, Allah, is a view of God that's actually pretty accurate. God is not all-powerful, but he's trying to give you a set of laws, karma, that helps us get along together and do the right things without always being told what to do by God. Come on, people, you've got to get it. Your ideas of an authoritarian God are absolutely evil. You don't want an almighty, all-powerful entity in heaven. That is as bad as Xi Jinping. It's as bad as Mao Zedong. It's as bad as Stalin. It's as bad as Hitler. And it's as bad as whoever's going to rule the mess that the U.S. will be if you let fools like Biden's administration and the deep state keep turning us towards authoritarianism. And I think the right likes authoritarianism just as much. It's just that they only like it when they're in power. And that's the stupid thing about America, is you've got the leaders of both sides thinking if we just could dictate everything, we'd make things perfect. You are tools of BORG. You are serving the dark God if you think like that. You are being useful idiots of Satan. How can I state it any more strongly than that? I'm mad at you motherfuckers, because you are destroying the country that birthed me, the country I love. You are destroying other countries I've come to know, like China, that I love. I have a Chinese daughter. I now have an Indonesian son. I've lived with the people of South America. And I know in my past lives, I've lived with the people of the cat world, whose God species, whose God members have been wiped out by BORG, and who sent their remnant as cats to be companions to people and healing to the ones that prefer cats. I know the same thing happened to the dog species. From the dog star, Sirius. Seriously. We're the ones chosen to perfect this new law, karma, and to bring it to the universe in Star Trek fashion and take over worlds from BORG, freeing the BORG souls too if they want to be freed, or sending them to death so they can be reborn in the BORG universe where they belong. We are going to find those worlds whose brothers and sisters we are in God. We are going to regenerate their DNA and mix it with our own if they want it, the new human DNA, so they can be better cat people, better dog people. And they're going to look as much like cats, as much like dogs as they want to, or as much like humans, because that's their choice. There's nothing wrong with messing with DNA as long as you do it in a godly fashion. The God species that invented DNA did it to serve God, to take the message, the current message of God, to as many worlds as possible. Because the old way of doing things was, okay, I'm going to throw my planet at you, and then you get mad at me and you throw a galaxy at me. That was how gods fought when incarnation was first introduced. They fought like stupid children, throwing planets and galaxies and black holes at each other, enjoying the feeling of getting to physically destroy their enemies and make them feel physical pain instead of the emotional pain that was all they had to work with before God invented the game of incarnation. We're getting really close to the finish line, people. And God has won, but he wants you to stay here on his team instead of having to go find you again when we finally get around to eliminating the Borg universe, or shrinking it down till we've got a lonely Borg all by himself that is completely isolated from mind controlling and messing with any other soul. And that's how the really dark souls are going to end up. They're going to end up with their own universe so far away from everybody else, every other God's universe, that they can't possibly generate enough spiritual energy to do anything. And they'll sit and whine about, oh, you didn't appreciate what I was talented enough to do as a god. To eternity. That's how evil ends up at the end of this game. It's going to come. I can't tell you when. We're going to have setbacks. We're going to have more battles. We'll win some, we'll lose some. But I can tell you that ultimately we'll win in the end. And that is the truth that you can pull out of a very special movie called Wayne's World. You know, the one that's about these two dumb kids that somehow start getting famous and attract the attention of these crazy beings from the future that just sit around and do what they want to do and have fun all the time and treat each other excellently. Party on. Well, I don't quite agree with the party on thing. The parties of senior creators, not, you know, wild bacchanals of drug-induced fantasy and endless sex. They can be, but that's, you know, not really what people who have the discipline to become a god become focused on. You're probably not going to get to do that. You're probably gonna be, if that's your penchant, your desire, you're going to be attracted by a fake Borg entity to think that's what you're doing and be pulled back down to the Borg universe and never really advance much beyond first or second level consciousness, which is where a lot of these people that think they're worshiping love, they finally found love and the true meaning of life through universal consciousness, Christ consciousness. How many people think that's where it's at? That is a very low level of spiritual attainment. I'm sorry to tell you, that makes you very subject to manipulation by Borg entities. Borg people who are false prophets. And if you are of this oneness tribe who think there is no such thing as evil or good, it's all good that we misunderstand. It's all an illusion. We're doing evil because it's not really evil. It's just we're living our life, which is, we're a part of God, experiencing evil because God is not evil. These people are crazy. These people are possessed. Yes, I'm telling you, you are crazy. You need mental help to wean you from BORG before it's too late. Now, you may attack me, you may call me hateful, you may call me whatever you want, but it is the truth. And you don't have much longer before you cannot change that truth. Some of you will die, and instead of coming back in the next life as human again, you're going to come back as one of the BORG God species, one of which is an advanced set of robots, kind of the prototype for the Terminator robots that are trying to destroy humanity. Yes, there is such a robot species out there that has no souls because they never developed one. They're all operating at level 0, no consciousness of anything but what BORG tells them to do. BORG is the ultimate programmer, is the inventor of the first programming language, which created the first robots. This is not a new idea of humanity. All the things that we're creating now, are things that have already been perfected by other God species and gone far, far beyond what we're capable of. We're doing it again because what we're here to invent is something that could not be invented except by a species with amnesia. You've heard that if you ever listened to Graham Hancock, or some of the other ones that are looking at the truth of where our species came from and finding, you know what? It sure looks like aliens or somebody came here and created humanity and gave us all this technology and then just disappeared. That's truth. And part of the truth is about aliens, and part of it is about gods. Because some of these aliens were gods in physical form. That's what incarnation is all about. Gods incarnate just like any other soul. The first creator, the real God, capital G, is incarnating and is right here on earth, right now as I speak. Not as a new Jesus coming to tell you beautiful lovey stories, or the conquering Messiah of the Jews or the Muslims. No. Just somebody like me talking to you and telling you the real deal and waiting for the event to happen, knowing that it's already done because I'm born and it's going to finish when I die. That's how it works. That's how this Messiah game works. God is capital M Messiah that comes back in an incarnation and wakes up through being human just like anybody else. Sometimes never gets past level 1 or 2 and has to go incarnate again, find another body to occupy and try to wake up. The difference with capital G God, God can incarnate anytime, anywhere, in any person. And if I am not the real capital M Messiah, when I die, when I fall off the wagon by being taken over by BORG, that torch will be taken over by the next one in succession in this event, because there are bloodlines involved here. There are the bloodlines of the descendants of the male demiurge, there are bloodlines of the descendants of the female demiurge. There are descendants of the bloodline of BORG. And there are the interesting bloodline of God, capital G, that can appear anytime, anywhere, and when it appears, sets a 12-generation time where any of those descendants from that appearance of this new bloodline can take the ball over the finish line if they wake up enough. I am of that family. That bloodline was established by my grandfather, Louis Arthur Trump, who was a fairly high-level Mason, a school teacher in California, Danville, California, a very righteous man who raised his family well, who, when school was out during the Depression, took his oldest son, my father Robert, who gave me his name, oddly enough, after naming his first children Peter and Paul, and having an unborn girl, stillborn girl, that I presume they might have been planning to call Mary, die in the womb, and the next child they produced was me, who somehow my dad, after losing his vision of, he actually had an interest, he witnessed the first H-bomb explosion on Eniwetok, and never would talk to anybody about that experience, except that he saw his bones through his arm. I mean, he never talked to his death day, as far as I know, about what he really experienced then. And we always thought, well, it's, because people of his era were so, right-wing, gung-ho patriotic that they kept their secrets to the grave like they were supposed to. I think it was something much more. And it just happened that when he died, I managed to be just at the right time, the right place to catch him, coming back from China at just the right time. He was in a coma, but I was there to hold his hand as his life passed away. And he was constantly moving his lips, which is strange because he seemed like he was trying to tell me something. He never did tell me, but I think I now know what it is. Because as he came to understand me better, I went from being the disappointing third son that you give your name and turns out to be like not the star of the basketball team, not the guy that brings home all the beautiful girls, not the one that is the great violinist and artist and blah, 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 blah. My two older brothers were the Abel and Cain of my family. They hated each other. They didn't murder one another, but they probably would have if they'd been given a chance, and very nearly did. My father had to separate them fighting because he was afraid that my older brother was going to kill my younger brother. And it ended up breaking my older brother's nose, which pissed him off so bad that he never forgave my father for it. And when he got away on his own, he actually decided to change his name from Trump to Trump before Donald Trump was even a thing. How weird is that? Both these brothers were very failed people, successful maybe in certain ways, but my oldest brother, none of his family will even talk to him anymore. His faithful wife of some 50 years finally divorced him. And, he's living alone as this weird right-wing extremist Hindu hermit somewhere in Louisiana, unless he's passed on or on to something else. I don't talk to him anymore either, because he's just such a negative, nasty person. My second brother, Paul, is one of these overbearing, domineering people who just has this absolute passion, knows he's going to be the best geologist in the world and make a bunch of money by exploring some new field. He spent a lot of years in Zimbabwe trying to explore their oil interests and ended up losing everything he had there because of the crooked government of Mugabe. Confiscated his farm, confiscated all his work, and basically kicked him out of the country. He worked in Zambia sometime. He even looked at working with the Chinese for a while. And I'm glad he didn't go down that route, because that would have been an even bigger disaster, as I know after my contact with China, communist China. At any rate, I don't expect you to believe me. If you want to hear more of my strange and wonderful life, ask me. I don't really like to talk about myself. I'm not a self-promoting person. It's been very hard for me to do what I'm doing now and tell you the things that I've learned that are just truths that I absolutely know after my spiritual experiences. And this is how real prophets are. Give me a try. Listen to me before you just dismiss what I'm saying. I don't want you to have to wait for another messenger. Or maybe it's going to be too late if I'm the one. If I'm the one, you're going to have, how much longer am I going to live? I'm 63 years old now. I know from intimations that I have that 66 is going to be a critical year when I might die. I may be assassinated. I may be turned to the dark side. Another critical year will be, let's see, what's the next one after that? It has to do with, the 2012 year is a special one, but not for the reason that you think. It came and went without much event because it was a marker stone for counting on a shorter calendar. Now, the Bible will tell you that, things are in weeks of years or weeks of centuries. This is an old model based on the Bible's truth, which is not true, which is kind of a nice lie that came out after being destroyed, or nearly destroyed, because a last attempt to get over the finish line failed, and God has only reached the 7th level of awareness. It was thought, or maybe he was going for the 8th level or 9th level and failed. And people thought, wow, things were really good when we were all at 7th level consciousness. Maybe 7 is the magic number, and we've got to tell everybody, don't go further than 7. That's why there's the 7 days of creation, and then everything was perfect. That's bullshit. God didn't stop on the 7th day. God was not resting, but was testing. And has been testing, and has now tested and found the pudding finished. Karma's ready to go. We don't need to work on it anymore. We don't need to test it anymore. After God dies, we're going to go into the 8th day of creation, which is not about perfecting, it's about implementing, about bringing this new invention of karma, perfected invention, Karma 12, let's call it, the ultimate spiritual virus, out of the test tube of Gaia, out of the test tube of the human species, and out to the galaxy, to the stars and beyond. The 8th day of creation will be about us bringing this to the galaxy and sending BORG forces running away from this galaxy to their other galaxies that they're still, some of them they've completely dominated. Taking the word of the new incarnation, the new system of incarnation and karma, to these old souls who are inhabiting black holes and galaxies that are still operate on the karma that just allowed disembodied gods to experience pleasure and pain in the form of a star, in the form of a hydrogen atom, whatever was the big creation of the moment. A lot of these things have become very stable, and you're not seeing many new versions of hydrogen coming out lately, are you? But there might be. And this is part of these cosmic evolutionary events. When God evolves, when something as important as karma is introduced and rolled out to the entire multiverse, we have the opportunity to evolve with God, all gods. The God of hydrogen, wherever and whoever he is, might, if he's still the god of hydrogen and hasn't given up his position to somebody else who is more interested in hydrogen and decided he's going to go paint or write graphic novels for a living, is going to get a chance to look at, well, what's good and bad about hydrogen? Is there anything about the properties that I could change without screwing up anything major that I might want to put into the next version? Well, there's some bad things about hydrogen. It's very volatile. Used as a fuel, it can explode very easily. Maybe there's some chemical that we haven't found that will moderate hydrogen into a very usable fuel. Make it very easy to extract from water. So it doesn't take a lot of electricity. So it doesn't take big plants that have big problems. These are the kind of things that can change as soon as we start working on the 8th day of creation. Whether he knows it or not, Elon Musk is one of the absolutely, I'm certain, unaware prophets of applied science, finding new ways of putting things together that do things that we never thought possible before. Really, another Tesla, actually a better person than Tesla, because Tesla was kind of an evil cat. If you look at his life, he had a lot of grudges. He had a lot of ideas of self-aggrandizement, and many of his deeds were kind of occultish, kind of driven by a BORG urge within him. He didn't care if his ideas had bad consequences. He only cared that somebody implemented his dream of unlimited energy, no matter what ulterior uses his technology might be put to. And this, more than anything else, is why his technology was suppressed, because people saw, wow, this could be really good, but if we don't roll it out right, the military uses could destroy us. Absolutely, could be an existential event. Imagine if you had an energy weapon that could strike anywhere at any distance through the focusing of electromagnetic energy. This is Tesla's dream. This has very dystopian uses, and in fact, there are directed energy weapons in existence right now that countries don't tell you they have, and which are causing people to be sick and die at a distance. This is what has happened with U.S. embassies that suddenly get these weird diseases. This is being actively used by the senior players in the great game of geopolitics. And you aren't hearing about it because they're afraid if they tell everybody they're going to panic, as many people already are panicking about what's going on right now with Russia and Ukraine and how it's somehow being pushed into an existential situation. A nuclear war, perhaps, or an absolute proliferation of bioweapons research, which has continued despite the Geneva Convention. Anyway, I think I've told you enough in this episode. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, ask me questions, contact me personally if you'd like to get involved in my mission in any way, shape, or form. Because it's time to pull off the gloves and get to work for God. For the real God. Before the dark God BORG takes you over and ends your soul's free game. At any rate, for the Omnist Hour, this is Rob Tromp. Happy Karma.